and those who harbor them. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
By November, it had become the sense among most 9/11 families that an independent investigation would be necessary to do what the Justice Department and the news media seemed unwilling to do.
We felt that the country was at risk from terrorists and from incompetence, and maybe worse.
They'd get a little outside Washington, they'd stop at a red light, and they began wriggling out of their capri pants and putting on their nice little skirts and suits so they could go around all the offices of Congress, bedevil these members of Congress and say, what are you doing about this?
Soon, a 9/11 Commission bill was being sponsored in Congress.
Senator Tom Daschle said last week that you called him several times and urged him not to investigate the events of September 11th.
Tom's wrong. He has, I think, in this case, well, let's say a misinterpretation.
He said on one occasion that the president asked him to do that at a breakfast meeting. Are you now saying that they weren't asking to block an investigation?
Lori was an independent. Mindy was definitely a Democrat. Actually, Kristen and myself voted for President Bush in the first election. And yet, even though he should have been our biggest advocate, he turned into one of our biggest adversaries.
We still don't know what happened in those buildings.
Sally partnered with widow Monica Gabrielle, who lost her husband Richard at the World Trade Center.
Why did the buildings fall? How could skyscrapers just like crumple to the ground in 10 seconds?
Never before or since had fire caused a steel frame building to collapse. World Trade Center Building Number 7, never hit by an airplane, also collapsed that evening.
The largest structural collapse in world history, the largest loss of life on American soil since the Civil War, and not one governmental or elected official wanted to know why and how this happened.
I think it's very interesting that this is what Dan Rather had to say when he watched World Trade Center 7 get controlled demolished. Collapsed. And now bear in mind, this building wasn't even hit by an airplane.
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
If you would like to get a sense on how a 47-story skyscraper could be blown up, controlled, demoed, collapse in 6.5 seconds, then I would suggest going to this website, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Or you could just do a YouTube search for Richard Gage and watch his lecture on the demo, blown up, yeah.
One of my colleagues who is right in the middle of the collapse of those buildings is CNBC's Ron Insana, who went down with a cameraman hoping to get close to the World Trade Center, and then it began to come down. The first one. Ron, take us through what you experienced.
Well, Tom, much of the area had been, in fact, cordoned off, and the cameraman from MSNBC and I were trying to get across to the west side of the World Trade Center in order to hook up with the rest of the NBC crews that we knew were there. As we were moving towards the building, we saw the top begin to blow out in a plume of smoke, and we heard the noise associated with an implosion. We turned and immediately...
You heard the building collapse, right, Mr. Insana?
We saw the top begin to blow out in a plume of smoke, and we heard the noise associated with an implosion.
Now surely, Mr. Insana, you realize your journalistic integrity is at stake here. Now you heard the building collapse, right? You heard the noise associated with collapse, right?
As we were moving towards the building, we saw the top begin to blow out in a plume of smoke, and we heard the noise associated with an implosion. We turned and immediately ran for cover in the other direction as debris began to rain down.
Okay, Mr. Insana. So you say you saw the top of the World Trade Center blow out, and you heard the noises associated with an implosion. Well, what else did you see?
Absolutely. Much like the images that were created for the movie Independence Day, when New York was exploding, the corridors of Lower Manhattan are so narrow and channel so much wind, even just on a plain windy day, that this material blew through in a way that was really unimaginable. It was truly frightening.
Thank you for your statements, Mr. Insana, and I, for one, appreciate your honesty, candor, and patriotism for bringing this information about 9/11 to light. Thank you so much.
The images that were created for the movie Independence Day, when New York was exploding, when New York was exploding, when New York was exploding, when New York was exploding.
I think the worst thing that we could do as Americans is pretend like this doesn't happen. There are millions of Americans that believe that 9/11 was an inside job. All we need do to allow this endless war on terror or global empire or resources or whatever it is they want is to remain complacent. This lie of 9/11 is all they have to justify all our foreign policy. All we need to do to allow them to turn this into a fascist state, reminiscent thereof of Nazi Germany, is nothing. Our complacency is our enemy. Get up, get involved, find a cause or an issue. It doesn't have to be 9/11. It can be anything. Just try and make the world a better place.